Welcome to Stories We Love. Stories We Love is about stories we love. And I get to interview people that are doing really beautiful things in the world. And it's meant to open your heart, help you feel more in love with this world and see the goodness in the world, and maybe inspire you to do something that you would like to do that would benefit yourself and others and the planet. Today, I have the distinct honor of interviewing my friend Marcus. Marcus Ratnathicam works with the prison system, and or some part of what he does. And what they're talking about is making prisons go to monasteries, turning prisons into monasteries. Marcus, I want to know, can you tell me a little bit about your program and how this works, and start with that? How do you turn a prison into a monastery?
It turns out it's not too difficult. I mean, most of the basic infrastructure is there. We have this one of the programs that we have as part of the prison monastery system is a book. And it's called The Art of Soul Making. And The Art of Soul Making, it's a 50-page workbook. And we wrote it because we launched our program in COVID, when all you could do for prisons during the time of COVID was send and receive text. You couldn't, no providers at all were allowed to go into prisons. And so the book starts with this story. And the story is a priest walks into a prison cell. And the person, it's a woman who's living in the prison cell. She steps up, and the priest says, my life is not so different from yours. I live in seclusion from society. I don't choose what I wear. I don't choose what I eat. My schedule is determined for me. I do essentially the same routines every single day. Not so different from your life. The primary difference with my life is that I chose this. And if you like, you could choose this for yourself too, and spend your life in monastic study. So that's a long way of saying that, prisons are actually set up not so dissimilar from how monasteries are set up physically. And it's filled with an entirely different intention. But so that's and that lies kind of at the heart of what our program does, is providing the tools and the resources and the encouragement to change the intention of prisons, not just for the incarcerated, but for the officers and staff, from one of what's essentially right now punishment to penitence. And that's the fundamental shift, to turn prisons into monasteries.
That feels so, this is a funny word, but I want to say so correct. Like when you have a corrections officer and they're using punishment, that does not feel correct. But when you have something that is helping someone reconnect with who they really are, which I believe is our spirit, our soul, that connection, that's so key. And that feels super correct.
It does, right? It feels like, oh, that's how it's supposed to work. It's been such an interesting dive. One of the things that I learned early on was that, the word penitentiary, the root of that word is penitence, which simply means sorrowful reflection. Essentially, it means sorrowful reflection, a kind of sorrowful reflection that leads to a transformation of the heart. The sorrow yokes the heart, which leads it to soften, to change. And so I think your sense that that's correct. I mean, I share that sense, and I think that we have that so easily because it's what it's meant to be. It's not meant to be punishment.
So when you are doing this transformation of the prison, what other factors? Because I know that there's a lot of factors that I got really excited about. Well, pretty much all of them I got excited about when I saw your documentary and saw your little preview of the documentary. What is the name of the documentary? It's called Unconditional Freedom. Is that what it is?
Unconditional Freedom at Home and in the World.
Yeah, it's beautiful. If you guys haven't seen it, go see it if you can.
Go see it. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's on our YouTube channel.
Oh, I love it. And your YouTube channel is?
is Unconditional Freedom. If you search Unconditional Freedom on YouTube, you'll find
See how easy it is? Um, so talk to me about the things you do at these prisons and how many, well, first, how many prisons are you working in right now currently?
Yeah, so right now we have some kind of presence in, I think we're up to around 180 or so prisons.
Wow.
And primarily it's through this Art of Soul Making program. So again, going back to this 50-page workbook, it's available on several prison tablet providers. So, you know, it's a common trend in prisons that people incarcerated are starting to get tablets, either shared tablets or their own tablet. And so we've partnered with some of these tablet providers, great people like Edovo is a really good one. And so we reach institutions and people incarcerated through the tablets. We also have a very robust program of sending out copies of this book. So we make a deal, we'll send a free copy of the book to anyone who asks. So this has just spread like well, for Californians, this is a bad analogy, but this is spread like wildfire in the prisons.
Right.
And we've shipped out, I want to say something crazy, like 2,000 books or something like that, shipped out to individuals. And we just get letters. I mean, every week there's tens of letters that we get from people, many requesting books. So we're in those many prisons through this correspondence program, and then we work in a much more hands-on way in a few different prisons in California as well, where we have kind of an in-person presence, where we have one of them where we have kind of a larger like build out, if you may, of the broader prison monastery model.
And so what is that larger build out? What are you doing?
Yeah, so so the program's essentially broken into four what we call silos, and the silos represent what we view as kind of the ecology of a human being. So we start from the approach, you know, if we wanted to foster human flourishing, if we as a society wanted to create prisons to be institutions of human flourishing, what would those prisons offer? And we asked that question on the belief that, you know, so everybody wants to reduce crime. Everybody wants to reduce the number of victims of crime. Everybody wants to reduce the number of people whose families get destroyed because they get sent off to prison, you know. And so what is the approach? This is our approach. We believe that human flourishing is the most effective. If we can foster human flourishing in people who are in prison, we can effectively reduce what's now like a 70% recidivism rate. We can actually start to prevent future crimes much more effectively and inexpensively if we're trying to grow people. So we start with this premise. The programs, so the four silos are healing, connection, liberation, contribution. Essentially healing, which is restoring the body, getting in touch with earth, all of the kind of restorative health benefits of being in touch with the earth. Also introducing better nutrients in terms of food. So the way that this silo shows up in terms of programs is we do prison farms. So we have, you know, experts come out and help us design farms within the primary security perimeter of prisons.
So on guard or on, wow. And so when the people are there, sorry to mean to interrupt, what kind of farms are they?
The one we had was at the Mendocino County Jail. It was a kind of a using mostly permaculture methods. It was, in that case, it was a very low-till farm, you know, drip irrigation, mulch, you know, multi-crop farm. It provided, the first year provided about $10,000 worth of vegetables, which went directly into the jail kitchen and saved the Mendocino taxpayers $10,000. And a year two was $20,000 of harvest, again, going right into the kitchen. Yeah, so it's great. It's great in many ways. And so within healing, we have prison farms. We work with people also like John Liu, who I know we've talked about a lot. He's one of our partners with the Unconditional Freedom Project, and he helps design ecological restoration projects in prisons. So he actually helped design a project starting to reintroduce and cultivate native species within the security perimeter of the Mendocino County Jail, with the long-term idea being that the jail can become a resource center for seriously degraded ecosystems in California that need either the seeds or trimmings of native species to replant native species where they are, whether they were destroyed by floods or forest fires. We all know what's happening in California.
Yeah, and also it's got to be reconstituting the soil, which if it's native species, if it's done in a way that's permaculture, which is usually pretty organic and mulch, it's got to also be sequestering the soil, and healing the soil, getting those microbes back into the soil that the soil needs. I think most prison yards are just dead dirt, basically.
Dead dirt.
Yeah, and so when you're doing that, it seems like it sequesters more water, so the prisons won't have flooding. It sequesters more carbon, and then it provides more habitat for our bees that we need, and our butterflies and other creatures, birds. And so I would think if you're in prison and you're now seeing nature come alive,
right,
it's got to be so healing, because I think a lot of people that get into prison don't have a connection with nature to begin with.
Absolutely.
It's really not something that's brought up in a lot of cultures. Yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely, absolutely. There's a warden in of a state prison in California, and he said, as far as I can see, care begets care. And we were talking about that in the context of a prison farm. If I can start caring for a plant, which I've learned to do, you see my plants, it immediately it spreads. That sense of care spreads. There's a pride. Oh wow, I saw these things when they were tiny, and now from my daily attendance, they've grown, and that care spills over to then me caring for myself, and me caring for you, and me caring for my neighbor. And then there's a whole really interesting science too. It's called I think the body's called green care or something like that. So apparently in a long time ago, they used to put plants in hospitals. And the reason they would put plants in hospitals was because they would actually speed up healing for people.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a kind of like feel good thing. It was, they wanted to turn their hospital beds. And they were able to do so by introducing nature into the hospital. We don't see that very much anymore, unfortunately, but there's a whole body of science.
Oh yeah.
Of how access to the physical planet and a vibrant, healthy earth affects our bodies, affects our nervous systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and plants in your home. Thank you.
Yeah.
Plants in your home, they give you more oxygen, they take up your carbon dioxide, but they
Right.
also pull in toxins. And I didn't know that about hospitals, but that makes so much sense. They also had a lot of hospitals that were outside, so you're getting the sun and things like that, which are also anti-sickness. It's so good to be outside.
That's it. And prisons are, prisons are dead dirt and concrete. There's another really interesting study. I'll get to the other three silos, but there's another interesting study. A woman, she's a professor at a University of Utah, I think. She did a study where they had at a prison, they had these recreation rooms. They were indoor recreation rooms for people staying in solitary confinement, and so they did not have very much access to outside, and the access they had to outside was covered. It was, you weren't near green basically at all. And they did an experiment where these rec rooms, there were two of them, each of them had a television, and normally they would just play like normal TV shows, talk shows, whatever. So they had one with normal programming. The other one, they put up videos of nature, like you might see in, some doctor's offices. I see them now, and it's a creek on a forest bed or whatever it might be. And I forget what they measured, but it was something related to basically nervous system activation.
Yeah.
And just the imagery on TV had some crazy statistical impact on nervous system measurements, and the officers fell in love with it because everybody who went to room 2 with the nature TV would come back totally calm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels so right on.
Pretty cool, right?
Yeah, it's so cool. Nature is so healing in so many ways, and I love that thing that you were talking about. It's that care circle. It's a luscious circle instead of a vicious circle. And to
I
me,
like that. Luscious instead of vicious.
yeah, well, I mean, that's what it feels like because, you learn to care about a plant.
Right.
Then you recognize, oh, my body needs something and I'm going to listen, just like I'm listening to the earth.
That's
I'm
it.
listening to that plant. I'm going to listen to my body. And then you listen to your friend. And just what you're saying, it's that thing, and care creates connection. And that's something that most people, not just prisoners, but most people are prisoners of a lack of feeling connection. There's a lot of disconnection going on in the world. And when people learn how to feel connected all the time, it's life-changing.
Totally agree. I couldn't agree more.
So when you guys grow that food, let's say,
Yeah.
what do you do with that food?
It, just like any farm to table system, you've got to harvest, you've got to process, you've got to store what you can't immediately integrate into the menu, and then later serve it. And that's exactly what was happening at the Mendocino County Jail. Was they did just that. And the stories that we got to hear from this food. I guess one day they did. This was the story that everyone from the sheriff to every single deputy there heard this story and loved this story. So they had these squash boats one day. So they were squash grown in the garden. You slice it in half, you carve out the center, and I think they put some kind of ground meat in the boat of it and baked it. You can imagine it's pretty tasty. This was such a hit at the jail that a guy traded his dessert for a squash boat.
That's so beautiful.
And it's just, I love that story. I love that story so much. And unfortunately, we didn't get, it's like we completed phase 1 of the prison monastery, which was implementing all 4 silos, which we'll get into them, but implementing all 4 silos. We're entering phase 2, and we can talk about that in a bit too, but we'll start to measure everything in phase 2 in a much more rigorous way. One of our staff now is earning her PhD, and her study will be on this model. There's a professor and former dean of public health at the UC Berkeley School of Public Health, who will help advise on the study to measure everything, including the food. But for now, we have the squash boat story.
I love it. And I gotta say, I don't eat any. I haven't had sugar in, I think, 14 years, maybe a little more. And when you eat a lot of sugar, it can cause ADD, anxiety. It causes
Right.
focus in your body to overgrow. It causes you just not to have as good a memory. A lot of just stress. It's a stress on the body, and it lowers your immune system. And to change your dessert for another squash boat, that's like really cool,
It's really cool, right?
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
I
Yeah.
thought so too.
What kind of squash was it? Do you know? My,
I don't know. I'll find out.
I love.
Yeah.
So then you have that, and then if you have extra food, what happens to the food let's say you can't store it, or it's the kind of food that needs to be eaten fresh. Is there anything you do with that?
We didn't get to do this at the jail, but we'll do this. So we just got approved to do the full prison monastery program at the Central California Women's Facility in Central Valley, California. It's actually the largest women's prison in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're kind of moving the system from a county jail to a kind of a much larger arena, which we need for this phase 2 of this system, in terms of, our end goal is we want to change the prison system from the ground up, and we want to develop a model that's more effective for not just for outcomes, not just for prisons fulfilling their purpose, which is preventing future crime, but also is more economically efficient, cost less.
Mhm.
And so roundabout way of saying, when we get to the state prison, what we'll do is excess food harvest will go to local shelters. Yeah,
Love that. That's so
yeah,
beautiful. Yeah, kind of a full circle, because
yes,
we're in sh
yes. What's that?
probably some of the people in prisons were in shelters or put people in shelters, and it seems like that's got to be healing on all sorts of levels as well.
I think so. There's a one of the first people we met when we started this program was a woman named Courtney Waybright. She runs all of the programs at actually this prison in Central Valley. And she said it was so eye-opening. We called her during COVID, to introduce this program, and she said, "Oh yeah, and the women are having such a hard time because they're so used to contributing to society, and they haven't been able to since COVID." And she's implemented all kinds of amazing. This woman's incredible, Courtney Waybright. She's implemented all kinds of programs, from like people who knit little feet
Socks, booties, shoes.
socks. Yes, thank you, Karen. The knitting socks to fundraising. They do all kinds of stuff to contribute. And she said the women are so sad because they can't contribute.
Mm,
And I thought that was so interesting and eye-opening to hear that's the information that she was hearing, that she was passing on. And it's just not what you think of when you think of prison.
right.
But intellectually it makes sense. Like, we're social creatures. Inherent to our humanity then is engagement and contribution. And so we're basically, if we can't contribute, we're indignified of our very existence,
Mm,
so contribution dignifies our existence.
it's so
It
nice.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought that was so cool. So yes, that's the idea, is you know being able turning prisons into contributive institutions.
Mm. Yeah, I've heard so many negative stories about prisons, about how they give the prisoners $2 a day worth of food, but they get $20,000 a month for the prisoner or something like that. So it's more of a money-making thing. But it
Mm.
sounds like, so you're working with the guards and the sheriff and the staff. How does that impact them? What's the change for them?
Huge. So the corrections officers have, I think it's either the highest or the second highest rate of suicide of any profession in the United States. They have higher, I don't know the way to describe it, but incidents basically of PTSD, a higher percentage of cases of PTSD than military veterans.
Wow, I
Uh,
guess long term, right?
exactly. Long term. And one guy described it. He said, the difference is, he said, for example, I walked into a cell one day and someone had hung themselves. And he said that alone was horrifying to see, not just see that, but then have to handle what one has to handle when that happens. You have to take the person down, the whole thing. He said, but it's not just that. This is what differentiates us from the military, and not to put down the military in the slightest, but when I come to work the next day, I have to walk by that same cell. And when I come to work 10 years later, I'm still walking by that same cell every day.
Mm.
And so there's a continual environmental reminder of this incident, and
Wow. Yeah.
so yeah, yeah. So they have crazy high suicide rates. They have some of the highest rates of alcoholism, some of the highest rates of divorce. I think I read somewhere that the average retirement age is 54. The average corrections officer dies at 59.
Mm,
So imagine, imagine you live, and the moment, basically you retire and you die.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I can see how it'd be so hard, especially if they're bringing that stuff back to their family and not talking about it, but bringing that energy back. Because a lot of people don't feel comfortable to talk about that stuff.
that's exactly it.
People do, but most people, I can't. I just imagine if you're in that kind of a situation, it'd be so traumatic to talk about it that you wouldn't want to put it on your family, or you wouldn't know how to talk about it without breaking down. And then that's a whole thing that people have where they're ashamed of their emotions, which all emotions are okay. I think, it's okay to
You
have.
you just articulated it precisely. And you can kind of ask any corrections officer. They're incredible people. I mean, some of the most incredible people I've met. And they'll all say, there's a culture of basically you leave work at work and you leave home at home, and you don't mix the two. And there's a growing kind of movement within the ranks. Also, there's great groups like there's a group called Amend out of UCSF who are working very diligently with corrections officers to try and basically kind of help dissolve that barrier.
Mm.
And then we have a program too called Guards to Guardians. And the idea, yeah, the idea is one, to kind of, so the diagnosis is exactly what you said. Imagine that your profession is hypervigilance for 12 hours a day, oftentimes more, because there's chronic understaffing, and while simultaneously having very real physical threats. What happens, what compounds over time is exactly what you said. You can't turn that vigilance off. And
Right.
so you shut down your whole humanity. And so what we're seeing is that punishment hurts not just everyone thinks punishment hurts the inmate population, which is totally true, but it's also killing the officers
And probably their families, they've got
and their
to
families.
be more on, you know, I would say more, like trying to keep it all in with their families, which then can have blow ups or have the alcoholism you're talking about, or the depression, or the shutting down. And so, how do you turn them to guardians? Like, what do you do? Can you talk a little bit about it? I mean, you don't have to get the whole detail. That might take.
Sure. I mean, yeah. So the book is available for free on our site. So just like Art of Soul Making, anyone can download it. It's an instruction manual for how to, first step one is a thank you to them, saying thank you so much. You've taken on probably the hardest role in society, which is people who take responsibility for restricting other people's liberty and put their lives at risk in the process. And so thank you so much. And, I've never seen a positive depiction of a corrections officer in
Yeah.
film, TV. It doesn't exist. So it's a thankless job on top of that. So we say thank you. You guys are heroes, which is true. They really are. You're heroes. And we acknowledge that, corrections officers, it's a tremendous heart that would answer the call to be a corrections officer. And I've met now tens of corrections officers, had pretty in-depth conversations, and all of them say the same thing. I mean, they're in those careers for decades for a reason. It's a calling, So thank you is the start. The second phase is, and future phases are basically, how do you start to build a relationship with your humanity? How do you start to turn that vigilance that's always looking out, and without totally disabling vigilance, because you need it to be good in that kind of job. It's a very dangerous job. start to allow the space of humanity within here at the same time. Very, very difficult task. And then build a relationship, build an internal relationship, release some control and build an internal relationship within oneself. And there's a whole set of very beautiful stories, all kind of spiritual parables. It's a non-religious text, but it's filled with beautiful stories to help you kind of go inside, really built for someone who doesn't have a lot of experience going inside, but wants to try it, but might be a little skeptical at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then the third part is kind of rekindling the desire, rekindling the sense of purpose. And that's the guards to guardians part. How do you shift from a guard of kind of mere confinement and security to a guardian, kind of a bit more of a spiritual role. It's not putting security and confinement aside, but it's adding this dimension of being a shaper and a keeper of a sacred space of penitence. How do I tend to this space such that the people in this space are not just safe, but can grow and flourish and do the internal work that they need to do to come out as better citizens.
Mm-hmm. Now, you used this word flourishing several times, and I'm thinking with the permaculture that you're growing outside, where you're growing the food in a healthy way that helps the soil grow, that food, you went from 10,000 one year to the second year was 20,000.
Yeah.
Flourishing in the food, and then the flourishing of the people caring. So the inmates work with the food, work with the plants if they want. I guess it's probably got to be a voluntary thing, right? And also
voluntary. It quickly became the most popular work assignment. But you have to sign up, and then because it's so popular, it's kind of selective who is allowed to do it.
Right. But so then they're caring for the thing. So they're going to get, I mean, just seeing something grow, little things like you were talking about, that's got to open up this thing. And then I would think if you're a prisoner and you're watching a guard care enough to do some of their own inner work while you're trying to do yours, it's got to create a deep appreciation and respect on both sides. If the guard sees the prisoners doing it and the prisoners see the guard doing it, it seems like there's got to be more of a capacity for connection, a capacity for real honesty and real authenticity.
Yeah.
And at the same time, a deeper respect, a deeper sense of, we're not so different.
Yes.
We're not so.
Yes, that's it. Exactly. We're not so different. We're not so different. That's it exactly. And the moment we can get to there, a lot of the aggression those fumes start to burn off. Yeah. Sweet. It's so touching. I'm so touched by it too. I'm as touched as you are.
Yeah, it's got to be so touching. It's got to be so healing for you. Then you were talking about the other silos. So there's a silo for the guards. Is that a silo? And is the guard book a different book from Guards to Guardian? Is different than the Art of Soul Making?
Different book. Yes. And then the other silos. So we did the earth with food and ecological restoration and the farming. Connection is about basically, now that I've kind of restored some basic physical health and a calm nervous system, and I've got some nutrients in my body, I can start to rebuild some more positive relationships with other people. And so we have, a series of programs that do that. Then comes liberation, which is the art of soul making. Liberation is essentially working with the mind. So this is whether it's, the art of soul making, for example, focuses very much on the impulse, passion. How do I take that wildness and that wildness that maybe drew me to commit a crime in the first place, to kind of transgress what a lot of people don't, but I have that extra oomph, and I have that extra oomph where I'll cross lines. How do I heal around this impulse so that I don't have to cut it off and kind of, just chop it off and just compel myself into be a good behaving person? but I can actually turn that impulse into a creative expression.
Right.
Every genius has this impulse,
Yes.
right? And so we don't want to shame it, we don't want to cut it off, we want to honor it and treat it as a gift, but we want to create a healthy ecosystem around it so that that genius can be used for construction. We have a program for addiction. We have a program for race. We have a program coming soon for women. Basically, any how do I get free from any of the kind of bondage that comes with these kind of marginalized identities?
Yeah, I call it cultural hypnotic suggestions. Your culture. I've written,
That's good.
but it's kind of, you're in a culture where there's a hypnotic idea that that wildness needs to be expressed in a negative way, or you might be in a
Right,
that wildness is expressed in creative explosion, like a Beethoven or Mozart or Yo-Yo Ma or the Rolling Stones, like there's a wildness that needs also to be expressed in a beautiful, creative way. And when you learn how to
yes,
honor it, I love that you aren't chopping it off. I love that you're not
right,
a bad thing because it's part of being alive. It's part of being human. It's part of being really expressed. If you learn how to express it and channel it in that way that you're talking about, where it's constructed,
totally,
that's
yes,
that is freeing. And when you're talking about, so that cultural hypnotic suggestions are, you're in a race or you're in a sexual situation where you're always considered the victim, or you're in a
right,
sexual situation where you're always considered the predator, or
yes,
you're always considered the victim, or you're a race when you're always considered the predator. Like they both need to be healed, because both the predator, what I realized one day is that all the people that were predators towards me as a kid and growing up, they all were victims. And
right,
when you get that the victims become predators and predators become victims, it's like this, if they're both trapped. But when
right.
you throw off the kind of cultural hypnotic suggestions or the belief systems or the the soup that they're in that keeps that victimhood or that predatorhood stuck, you now open to a freedom. And that's what you're talking about with unconditional
That's it. That's it exactly. And that's unconditional freedom. That's it exactly.
freedom.
Yeah.
You can be, you can be, you know, stuck at home and be really free, or you could be
Yes.
in prison and be really free.
Yes.
And I know people that do that, and I did that. I've done that in my own life. I'm free all the time. And part of freedom comes from being comfortable with all of your emotions, being comfortable with who you are, being comfortable with your past, and being comfortable with your desires. It seems like all of that, when you're free, those things can flow, and they're not like, you're not ashamed of them, you're not stopping them, you're just allowing them to be free. And those desires are so important.
That's it.
Yeah, sorry.
That's it. Yeah. And that's it. And I really respect how much pain there is in prison. Like, and so I'm not trying to paint this kind of super rosy picture, because it's not a super rosy picture. But I will say that I have spoken to countless people serving anywhere from 5 years to on a death sentence, saying, I never felt more free in my life than I feel right now.
That's so beautiful.
It's so powerful. It's so powerful to see someone, and because and it's, I think there's actually, I know that there's people in our documentary saying that, and it's undeniable that they found something. And it's so possible, regardless of circumstances. It's possible. And that's what we aim to do with unconditional freedom. Is, not everyone's going to want that or take that, and that's totally fine. But it's on us to provide the tools. We have the tools, we have the spiritual tools, we know how to do that. So it's on us to provide that in prison.
And then those that want it. I know there was a guy I knew, and you helped me with this. Um,
Uh-huh.
a guy I knew when I was growing up, and when I was in second grade, he used to light matches on me while I was walking to school, and he was on his bike, and my mom told me to ignore him and read a book instead, which is probably why I'm such a writer now. But he then started the elementary school on fire, then got taken away by the police, and later um, raped and killed two girls that we know of, and maybe more. So I think he's in solitary confinement. And just because I've had a spiritual awakening, you helped me because I wanted to just write a letter of forgiveness to him and a letter of love. And I don't know
Oh,
if he got it. I don't know if he read it. I don't know if he cared, but I wrote it, and it gave some freedom to me, some
right.
extra freedom about him to be able to express, a forgiveness and a love and an appreciation. And I knew as a kid, I remember riding my bike past his house and being thrown out of his house, literally like 6 or 7 feet onto the cement from somebody. I didn't even see who threw him, but he was being, and then the people yelling, and he was like, second grade. And so, you see this, and I know if he had been exposed to someone like what you guys are doing, if he'd had that at that age,
Right.
that's what I would like. I like what you're doing with prisons, and then I'd like to get it to the young, the Father Flannery's thing, which one of my guests was in Father Flannery's boys school, and now he teaches meditation and yoga in New York City's 5 boroughs. So so like
Yeah.
it's possible. But so anyway, so okay, so there's the farming and the nutrients, and then there's the guards to guardians, and then there's the art of soul book, soul making
Yep.
book.
Yep. So essentially you can think of it kind of like from the ground up or from the body up. So, starting with the body, then my connection with others, then my mind, and then the last is contribution, which we talked about, which is actually kind of at the heart of everything. Is if you look actually at the symbol for our nonprofit, it's an X and then a slash and a plus. And what it means is from canceled to contributive, from something we see as waste to something that we see as an asset and a contribution. And so everything we do is about taking what we discard as a society and have deemed useless, basically, right? And saying no. If you give the right conditions, not only are they useful, they're genius. And not only are they genius, they're essential for, let's just say I'm like kind of dominant culture. They're essential for our thriving.
Yes.
We're stuck without these groups on the margins. We're absolutely stuck as a society. There's this guy, Warren Brush. He's a world famous permaculturist. He just told me, he said, I just completed my 50th trip to Africa. He works with USAID and teaches farming in like the most drought conditions imaginable. Like he showed me photos of Somalia, where the earth looks very much like a prison yard. And then he showed me the before and the after, and how he was able to produce food on like inches of rain a year in totally dead dirt. And so he's designing the farm at the prison. But anyways, long way of introducing Warren Brush, incredible human being. If you look him up, he says, he says, in systems theory, all new energy enters from the margins. That's in systems theory. That's how a system works. Energy is drawn in from the margins and then enters the center, and then spills back out and then draws in. So he says it only makes sense what you guys are doing at Unconditional Freedom. If you want to really change society, you would, if you were really serious about it, you would start at the margins.
Mhm.
And so that's what we aim to do.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And what you're saying about, the things that we discard, or the people or the parts of society that we discard. When you look at, let's say you're cooking something in your home, and you have food waste, and you compost it and you put it in the earth, it becomes nutrients for the earth. You
Right.
know, and there's nothing, I remember when I was in school, I studied mind body science and pre-med. And when I was in school, they were talking about junk DNA. And I thought, how could there be junk DNA? That doesn't make sense. And now we know that junk DNA is not junk DNA. It's important. It's part of it's part of the genome, and it's
Right.
important part of
Right.
when you look at farming, organic or permaculture or regenerative farming or biodiverse farming, you think, oh, I got to get rid of the weeds, but some of the weeds make the soil healthier, and some of the weeds attract the bugs that eat the bugs
That's
that
it.
in your food. So there's just like when you look at everything and you see that it's all valuable.
Yeah.
One is valuable. Every creature is valuable. Every plant is valuable. They all have a way of helping. Plants do something called succession, where they might start off as a weed, and then after it's nourished the soil in a certain way, then it turns into another kind of plant. Some other plant gets attracted to that soil, and then that plant succeeds. And then once it goes away, another plant comes in, and it's just this whole succession. And it's so interesting how what you're talking about with the prison, it's so much about recognizing how to plant the things that will nourish the plants and take away the thing that, and those things will naturally, without chemicals, take away the stuff that imprisons them.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And you can do all kinds of fun things with the chemicals analogy, right? Um, yeah,
Fascinating.
I mean, that's exactly it. And it's so funny. I mean, it's not it's not my, I've had to learn so much, because it's not my way of thinking really. It just started with feeling a little bit of pain when I would see a prison. It's like you drive by a prison and you feel some pain, or you have a friend who has a brush with the law, and you face maybe a friend or a family member going to prison, and then you're like, oh, wait a second, that means they're going into a really shitty environment that statistically they won't come out better from.
Right. What is it that started you guys doing this? Because I know there's a whole team of people doing this. What was the impetus?
Honestly, the impetus was, it was kind of twofold. I mean, one is that I had a conversation. So there, Nicole Dedone. She's the beautiful woman, my best friend. This is her prison monasteries, her vision. And I remember it was like 2014 or something. We just started this program in 2020. But I remember back in 2013, maybe 2014, and I was driving around with her, and I said something like, well, if you could do, she was running a company at the time, One Taste. And, she was the CEO and the primary teacher. So she was a very busy woman. And I was driving her around, and she was like, God, like sometimes, it's not always fun because it's so busy. And I said, well, if you were just doing what you wanted, what would you do? And she said, well, I'd probably start with prison work. And I was like, really? I was like, that's so surprising, like what would you do? And she was like, well, I think I would turn prisons into monasteries. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like turn prisons into monasteries. Are you crazy? What are you talking about? But that stuck with me for so long. And so it's been this idea that all of us have been, this kind of group or of us have been dreaming of for a long time. We are collectively like really kind of, we're serious about a certain path of liberation. And so we've come across a lot of spiritual tools. We come across a lot of practices and use them for a period of time, or use them for a long period of time. And so we've always wanted to distribute this wealth, this accumulated wealth of these tools. And then COVID hit. And then our organization got into, One Taste got into just I mean, the worst kind of media nightmare that anyone could even dream of. And you know, there's reports of an investigation. There's all kinds of stuff, all in public headlines. And so it was kind of a twofold moment, like, well, we better get started working on our dreams now, because we don't know where this nightmare goes, you know. And then I think it just brought us that much closer to what life is like for someone who's been accused of something. And you know, and that's just our practice, is we take pain and we turn it into medicine. And we felt some pain, and so we said, well, now's the time to begin this dream we've had for a long time, and create medicine. And so we just got to work. You know, we got to work. And myself, you know, so Nicole kind of laid out this vision, more articulated it much further than that phone call, that car ride conversation. And then myself and a woman named Marissa Ward, who's been a huge part of creating this program, and a woman named Marla Moffett, huge part of creating this program, Nancy Coleman, Hisham Hattur, Jason Thompson, Manoj Agrawal, Leah Mendelson. These are just people, is just a group of us got together and just started creating this program together. I'm sorry, I know I missed a few names, but it was a lot of us, you know,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
started to do it.
All such beautiful people. I just love them.
Beautiful people.
People. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. Is there any other thing that I should ask you that I haven't asked you yet? That you
Yeah,
want?
we can talk about the program coming up, if you want to do that, at the women's prison.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so we're taking the prison monastery and we're implementing it at Central California Women's Facility. And so what we're doing is we're gonna go into one of the housing units that's considered one of the let's say worst behaving housing units, high incidence of security. You know, there's, for some contrast, they have like an honor dorm, which is almost zero security incidents, and it's just people who are living very, very peacefully and you know, incarcerated. This housing unit is not that. And what we'll do is we'll implement these 4 silos, and the way this will look is, again, using the existing schedule of the prison, we'd introduce 3 different work crews into the regimen. One would be the farm, second would be the kitchen, third would be what we're calling the credible messengers, I think is the name that we're using, credible messengers, which is a mentorship program where what we would do is we would have a morning and evening practice, which, you know, is basically what we would do, like yoga, meditation, writing practice every morning, every evening. During the day, you introduce these new work programs, whether it's hands-on work in the kitchen or the farm or the ecological restoration project, or academics work to get accreditation for these skills. Then in the evening, there would be what we call a salon. So we've gotten to meet a whole host of incredible healers, artists, scientists, writers, poets, musicians, theater actors and actresses, Zen priests, you know, yogis, the whole work. So we would have a rotation in the evening of an optional evening salon, bringing basically the best of the best who we know in all of these, let's just call them contemplative practices or liberation practices, or people who are focused on healing the planet, or people who are really focused on like nutrition and how nutrition works with the mind, and bringing them into this evening salon at this one housing unit that has a lot of problems at this women's prison, and sharing their craft. And maybe it'll be, you know, a three-day maybe an author will come for 3 consecutive days and read 3 chapters of their book and discuss the book, or maybe John Liu will come, or maybe Warren will come and talk about working with the earth, or maybe Rodessa Jones, who does theater for the incarcerated, will come and host a theater workshop. And so start to introduce these really interesting, entertaining, soul enriching curriculum of the best in the world to come and do this. And we would just slowly, the goal is, and what will work with the staff and administration at the prison is to turn this housing unit to the equivalent of not just an honor dorm, but one equipped with these mentors or these credible messengers who can go out and be peacekeepers wherever they go and share what they're learning in this very concentrated experience in this housing unit with all of the other housing units, so that they become the leaders and the bringers of good.
So the peacekeepers and the mentors are from the part of the prison that are not as allowed, or that are more restricted. Is that what you're saying? Or are they from another part?
No, they'd be in this part. So wherever we go, what we've learned is that there's people who have some kind of let's just say enlightening experience, which is what happens in this type of work. And they say, I want to bring this to others. Those are the people where we want to offer them training in how to bring it to others. And that would be their vocation. So they would be of service in the entire prison to introduce teaching and guidance that makes everyone's lives better.
That's so wonderful. And then I imagine, if they're doing this and their behavior is changing, if their attitude is changing, if their ability to mentor, or their ability to care for the soil, or their ability to do more of the biologics, or be in the kitchen better, is shifting them in other ways, and the Art of Soul Making book is shifting them. I imagine that if they are a person who's potentially able to get up for parole, that they're going to have a much better chance, because people, those people will see them. You often see them many times before they get parole, but they'll see them shifting, and they'll see that shift, and they'll recognize it, I think, because you see when somebody's more lit up, you see when somebody's more calm, when somebody's more confident, when somebody's more connected. So I can't imagine that it wouldn't be good for them for when they get out. And then also now they're going to have skills that are usable skills. Mentoring is something people need still. That could be something in a someplace. There's so many places where you can mentor, like everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And not only, like you said, I mean, you raise a great point. Most people get out. Not only do they have accreditations and skills, whether it's mentorship or with food, or with the farm, or with ecological restoration, but they themselves have healthy soil inside them. And so you can, what a lot of well-intentioned programs don't have as good results as they could, because we're trying to graft skills on top of arid soil,
right?
And for some people that'll work. For a lot of people that won't work. You have to strengthen the soil before you plant the seeds.
Right.
And so, Unconditional Freedom as a group of people, and now with 350 volunteers, what we're really good at is creating healthy soil. And then we can bring in other people who can come in and do job training, do skills training. That's not so much our thing. It's vital, but what our thing really, really is about is creating healthy soil.
And you're doing the healthy soil on the yard, and you're doing the healthy soil in the hearts and minds and souls of the people who are in the prison, and you're doing the healthy soil in the guards to guardians. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. That's it exactly.
It's so important.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Because
I think so too.
I believe that everybody,
Sorry?
I don't believe anyone's bad at their core. I believe the only reason people do things that are bad is because they've lost who they are. They've forgotten who they are. And so they do something out of a negative impulse that they don't have control over. And the fact that you're taking wild part of them and putting it into something nourishing for them and for the world. That just, that's so good. And it's so valuable. And when you can help people reconnect with who they really are and get that real freedom from those programs that they've gotten, or from that culture they were raised in, freedom from those belief systems that they had, and be free from the drugs and alcohol, or be free from the racial misunderstandings or the victimization or the predation, all of those things. When you get that freedom, it's just so, it's holy.
It's holy. Yeah.
It's holy.
Yeah.
You're doing holy, sacred work that is so important, because everybody's valuable. And when they get reconnection with that, you don't want to hurt people. When you know how to take care of plants, or you know how to cook, or you know how to mentor, you want to nourish people. It doesn't
Right.
translate. So I think, do you have a stat on the recidivism of people who have graduated from your program compared to real, normal?
Well, first of all, I just want to say how just touching it is to have to talk to someone who so deeply, deeply, deeply understands what we're trying to do. It's very, very touching, Karen. So I just want to take a moment to say that. I mean, it's so touching, and I agree. It's bringing heaven onto earth. That's our job, is bring heaven onto earth. And so we just have our little project here and doing our part, and you're doing your part, and that. But I agree, that work is holy. It's the only thing that's important, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because there's so much, people do things for money, but there's no point in making money if you're destroying your planet. There's no point in making money if you're harming people or animals or creatures in a way that is not, right. There's no,
yeah,
money's great, but if you make money your priority, which is what a lot of corporations are required to do, money has to be the priority. Um,
right, exactly.
They're required to do that, so they're kind of psychopathic corporations. But if you're making money, and you're making connection, and you're benefiting the earth, and you're benefiting people, and you're benefiting creatures, like, it's win 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 win. I can't do anything in my life that doesn't win for me and win for everybody else. It won't. It
Right, exactly.
has to win win win, because the other way that we've been going with the prison systems, with the school system, with the food system, with the farming system, with all the different systems that we have, it's all kind of like, I'm going to beat you up, and I'm going to use you, and I'm going to get everything I can out of you, and extract everything I can. And
That's
then,
it.
that's pretty much it. And then, but now
That's it. That's it, exactly, right there.
right, and now you're growing people that won't do that. They'll be more aware of caring. They'll be more aware of
Right.
and kindness and
Yeah.
contributing. So I
Yeah.
applaud.
Yeah, and those of us not in prison get more whole in the process, because we're all missing an arm, and we may not realize it. I didn't realize it until I started this. It was like, oh my God, the idea that 2 million Americans can be put away in prison, and I can just look the other way. That's a serious delusion on my part. We're really hurting. We're
Right.
really hurting with that many people incarcerated and not coming out in good shape. We're desperately hurting.
Yeah, and I know so many people that have been in prison that,
Right.
and there's such great contributions. They're doctors,
Yeah.
they go and work in prisons. They go volunteer.
Right.
Are so caring, and they get it, if they've healed, they get it, so that's so incredible. Um, God, I love you. I love what you're doing.
I love you too.
I love the whole gestalt of this, if that makes sense. It's like such a,
Yeah.
by holy, I mean, it's HOLY, but it's also WHOLY. Like, you're taking care
Yeah.
on all these different levels, so everybody gets whole. And of course you guys get whole, and you have 350 volunteers. You said that's so cool. And what are the
Yeah.
volunteers? Are they going to the prisons? Are they writing letters back? Are they What are they doing?
There's a mix. Some of them go in, a few of them go in and teach yoga. They do a stretching program for officers. They do meditation classes, yoga classes, art of soul making classes, and then a lot do letter writing. So we have a program where anyone, and I encourage anyone who listens to this to check it out. If you go to unconditionalfreedom.org, go in the top tab, go down to the prison program, and go to the art of soul making program, you'll see you can sign up. You do I think it's like a 15-minute certification program, all done online, just watching some videos. And then we'll pair you with someone incarcerated who's signed up for the art of soul making and sent us a letter. And so when you sign up, we'll pair you, and you'll get a letter, and that'll be your pen pal. And you can exchange letters from your computer. It's anonymous. You don't have to reveal your name. It's digital, so you don't have to go buy stamps and go to the post office. It's free, and it's a way to change the prison system in a very real way. Exchanging letters with someone incarcerated within a context of a program that can actually enrich yourself and whoever you're corresponding with in the process. Like, that's criminal justice reform. So if you want to take part in changing the prison system, become a letter writer, and it's free, and we totally encourage you to do it. And then I'll just put I'll put a little pitch out there for what we're doing in this project. So I've mentioned a kind of phase one of the prison monastery, which was just implementing this system, putting the theory to practice. Phase two now is implementing this system that we know works quantitatively in a much larger arena of a state prison. It'll have we'll be broadcasting everything we do on the Adobo tablet. So what we offer to these 200 women will not just reach the rest of the prison through the mentors. It'll reach 150 incarcerated individuals through the prison tablet. So it's a very leveraged program. And then it'll also have this PhD study that I think I mentioned. Where a woman, Kate Fagan, a criminal justice veteran, who's doing her PhD program, will be studying the program and doing a study on what's called it's called the Prison Monastery, a human and economic proposal. So she'll be studying the outcomes in terms of human flourishing and mental health, and also the economics of how this changes the cost structure of a prison as a result of reduced security incidents and improved health. And for some perspective, California spends $120,000 a year per inmate, right, between confinement and health. And so just a 5% change on that number more than like triple covers the average cost per incarcerated participant in this program.
Yeah. Well, and they're finding cost, growing organic regenerative permaculture or farming, both also can be much more prolific and much less costly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Buy plows, you don't have to do a lot of stuff. You don't have to buy fertilizer. You don't care about the war in Ukraine in terms of the cost of fertilizer. It's not relevant. You don't have to buy seeds. Exactly. So like you're doing it in such a similar way. I love that. And that data makes it super attractive.
Yes. Yes. And phase three will be with this documented data-driven system. We'll be offering this to any government that wants to implement it for free. So our goal is to change the prison system from the ground up. So we're in phase two, and phase three will be, data and plenty of documentation, more documentaries, et cetera, in hand. We can go to any government and say, not only does this make more sense for your citizens, but you're going to save money if you do this. And then we'll teach them how to do it for free.
Right. Beautiful. And also, just in terms of saving money, if they're growing food and they're eating the food, that's saving money too, because you don't have to buy
saving money right there. Yeah. Although I'll tell you, prisons don't spend the bulk, food is a relatively low, it's a low dollar item on the budget, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, one of my friends actually went to prison for something that she didn't do. And one of the things she said is, I cannot wait to have broccoli. I cannot wait to see something.
That's, yeah,
But just that you are growing some food that is green or orange or purple, that
yeah,
is helpful. That also has to be so good for the morale, just because eating that other food,
totally.
it's so toxic for the brain and the body.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you so
yeah.
much, Marcus. And
This has been so lovely.
yeah, and I've had pen pals at prisons before, not with a program like just giving love because and it was always with letters. This was before internet, and people I didn't know, just like they would say, here's some people that are in prison that need some support. And I would say, yeah,
Right.
and it was always so beautiful, and it was always wonderful. So I just know everybody can transform, and everybody who's ever done anything that they felt was wrong or bad or hurtful to another person, all of that can be healed, and when
That's
you,
it.
that's where you get real freedom.
Yeah, perfectly said.
Well, I love you so much. Thank you so much
I
for
love you.
harassing Marcus.
Yeah, it was so worth it. This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcus. I love
Yeah. Okay.
you. Love
All
everybody.
right. I love you. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, and everybody who's joined in, yeah, go to unconditionalfreedom.org.
Yep.
Unconditionalfreedom.org. Go to YouTube, watch the Unconditional Freedom Art of Soul Making YouTube video. Download it if you want to be a letter writer or see how other ways that there might be for you to contribute. Or maybe you have some other ideas that you're getting from this at a local school or a local children's place where they need more green and need more kindness. There's so many places where we can benefit the world, and I'm so glad that you tuned in. Please stay tuned for the next one. Thank you again, Marcus. Thank you, everybody at One Taste. Thank you. I love you guys.